5 companies, a battalion that made Rommel himself hunger for their allegiance, to Hokowitu, a 2, the war party of 2. The 28th Maori Battalion didn't fit any manual. They carried Lee Enfield .303s like Taiaha combat staffs. Their Bren guns became Patu clubs when ammunition ran dry. They fired from the hip because that's how warriors fight, close, personal, looking death in the eyes. Company designations read like tribal roll calls. A company, Ngakeri Kapia, the Gum Diggers. Men from Northland who dug kauri resin from swamps with bare hands. They knew how to work in filth. B Company, Ngā Ruku Pine, penny divers. East Coast boys who dove for coins thrown by tourists. They held their breath longer than anyone thought possible. C Company, Ngā Kaupoi, cowboys from the King Country, stock riders who could track anything across broken ground. D Company called themselves Ngati Walkabout, urban Maori from Wellington and Auckland, educated, bilingual, harder than the stereotype. HQ Company got stuck with odds and sods. They hated the name. They earned their respect anyway. European officers scratched their heads. Military doctrine said tribal divisions weakened cohesion. These men proved doctrine wrong. Each company fought for their Wanau honor. The cowboys wouldn't let the gum diggers outshine them. The penny divers would die before disappointing their tapuna. Competition bred excellence, and excellence on those killing grounds across 3 theaters bred legend. Their signature was the bayonet charge, 17-inch steel blades fixed to point .303s, the haka war cry before impact. Ancient Polynesian intimidation fused with modern combined arms doctrine. They didn't just fight wars, they weaponized culture itself. The Germans felt it first on Crete, May 27, 1941, 42nd Street. A dusty, olive-lined road on the northwestern edge of the island where elite German mountain troops had dug in expecting easy prey. The 141st Mountain Regiment had fought in Norway, Greece, and France. They understood war. They understood infantry. They were not prepared for what came out of those olive groves. The boots were falling apart, cracked leather, soles flapping. 300 Maori warriors crouched in the shade, staring down 1,500 meters of exposed road in 120-degree heat. No water for 6 hours. Rations were a memory. But the bayonets were sharp. Major Humphrey Dyer checked his watch. 1,100 hours. He turned to the men crouched in the dust around him. The time had come when we were going to show Jerry a few tricks. The haka started low. Throaty growls building into something ancient. Hundreds of voices in unison, slapping thighs and chests. Rifles held like Taiaha spears, catching the noon sun. Then the whistle. They rose. Obergefreiter Klaus Weber pressed his eye to the MG-34's iron sights. His hands were already shaking. 11.79 kilograms of precision German engineering mounted on a solid bipod. Cyclic rate of 900 rounds per minute. At 800 meters, he should be able to stop a charge cold. He opened fire. The Maori kept coming. No covering fire, no tactical bounds, no suppression, just 300 men at full sprint, screaming in a language that predated gunpowder, bayonets glinting silver in the dust. The Bren gunners had slung their weapons to their hips, firing, walking. Brass cases spun in golden arcs across the sun-baked ground. Weber traversed the gun left to right. The barrel heated. His loader jammed another belt in. Still they came. At 600 meters, the shapes were no longer shapes. They were faces. At 400, he could hear individual voices, cutting through the roar of the Spandau. At 200, his loader whispered something Weber couldn't hear over the hammering of the gun. Then the gun jammed. Overheated barrel. The breech locked on a swollen cartridge case. Weber looked up. The Maori warrior was 10 meters away, rifle angled forward like a spear. Weber grabbed for his sidearm. Too slow. The ass. Lee Enfield's butt cracked his temple. He hit the ground. The bayonet followed. When the Bren guns ran dry, the gunners swung them. 14 pounds of steel bipod and barrel. Same arc as the Patu, same principle, different century. Private H.G. Passay drove his blade into a paratrooper's chest, twisted it free, and kept moving. Sergeant Reg Saunders vaulted a sandbag wall and swung his rifle like a club at a German still fumbling with a Gewehr 43. Major Dyer came face to face with a Wehrmacht sergeant at 2 yards. No time to aim. He triggered his captured Luger from the hip. Hemi bayoneted one, he said afterward. I got one at a couple of yards in Wild West style. The 141st Mountain Regiment broke. Not a tactical withdrawal, not a fighting retreat, a rout. Veterans of 3 campaigns streaming backward, abandoning equipment, leaving their wounded. The unit that had never been broken dissolved in 12 minutes of close-quarters violence. Saunders collapsed against a smashed MG-34 position, lungs burning, rifle slick with blood and dust. It was crazy, he said. The most thrilling few minutes of my life. We were all obsessed with this mad race to slaughter with the bayonets. 42nd Street belonged to the 28th Battalion, 1,500 meters of road, taken by starving men in falling apart boots. But the charge at 42nd Street was more than a tactical victory. It sent a message through the entire Axis intelligence network. German units began calling them Schädeljäger, scalp hunters. Axis intelligence reports flagged the 28th Battalion specifically, warned against engaging them without overwhelming firepower advantage. Panzer Grenadier veterans requested transfers rather than face another haka at dawn. The psychological damage was deliberate, and it deepened at night. North Africa. The desert after dark turns cold fast, temperature dropping to -2, no moon, German sentries, gripping carabiner 98 Cade rifles with white knuckles, staring into absolute black. The Maori night patrols moved without boots on stone. Metal stayed away from metal. The L1A1S LRs stayed slung. Captured Luger P0 8S made no sound when you got close enough. 8 rounds in the magazine. Usually more than enough. Private Wiramu slid between rocks on his belly. His breath came through the nose, slow and shallow. Old hunting discipline from the Uruweras. His grandfather had taught him to move through the bush like water. The German sentry was 19 meters away, close enough to smell his cigarette. Gefreiter Hans Meller from Bremen was 19 years old, 3 months in North Africa. He'd watched his squad leader disappear 2 nights ago, found him at dawn with bullet holes in a tight circle. No spent brass anywhere nearby. Muller's platoon commander had briefed them. These weren't ordinary infantry. They moved without sound. They used your own weapons against you. They chose when you would die, and you never heard them coming. Muller heard nothing, felt cold steel against his neck. Wiremu's whisper came in perfect German. "Drop it, Fritz." The carabiner clattered onto rock. The knife found the kidney. Muller went down without a sound. Sergeant Rangi materialized from the dark. 2 Lugers, ammunition pouches stuffed with 9mm rounds. Every night brought more German hardware. Walter P-38 stick grenades, even a Panzerfaust the week before. They were learning the enemy's tools the same way their ancestors learned a rival tribe's fighting methods. Study them, absorb them, use them back. 3 more Germans died before dawn. Knives, mostly. 1 strangled, 1 shot with his own sidearm. By sunrise, the entire German company had pulled back. No contact orders from battalion. too many good soldiers disappearing, too many weapons going missing. The night belonged to the scalp hunters, but night raids and charges across open ground are the kind of warfare that bleeds battalions slowly. For the 28th, the account would come due at a railway station in central Italy. Cassino, February 1944. The winter had turned the Liri Valley into a brown swamp. The Rapido River had flooded its banks. The ground between the Allied lines and the railway station was chewed to nothing by weeks of artillery, waterlogged, cratered, wrapped in wire. Engineers couldn't clear the approach roads. Tank support never came. 200 men from A and B companies crouched in flooded shell holes, staring at the railway station. Concrete and twisted steel. German machine gun positions built into the masonry. MG-42s with a cyclic rate of 1,200 rounds per minute. The fastest firing mass-produced machine gun of the war. Lieutenant Colonel Monty Fairbrother moved through the rubble checking faces. A company, B Company, gum diggers, penny divers. His company commander pulled him aside, voice barely controlled. "Sir, we've got maybe 60% strength left. 120 men already lost in previous engagements. 200 remained. The mathematics of what they were about to do were not complicated. 800 hours. The barrage would lift in 30 seconds. Private Timona Nui clutched his Lee Enfield like a Taiaha war staff in the gray morning rain. The bayonet caught what little light there was. Fix bayonets. 200 steel blades locked onto muzzles. The artillery stopped. The silence hit like a physical weight. Stand as Maori. They rose out of the mud. The MG-42 positions opened at full cyclic. 7.9 2mm rounds crossed the killing ground in sheets. The first 50 meters claimed 30 men. The Spandau crews traversed left to right, cutting down anyone who stood. Private Ngata took a round through the chest. He kept running. His Lee Enfield was empty. He swung it. From his bunker, Obergefreiter Klaus Weiss fed another belt into the MG-34. He had fought in Russia. He had seen Soviet mass charges break on German steel, wave after wave, until the bodies piled high enough to form cover for the next assault. This was different. The same. Soviet charges carried a desperate, fatalistic energy. These men ran toward the German positions like they were answering a personal challenge, not like they wanted to survive, like survival was beside the point. Weiss's hands shook. His squad leader was screaming fire orders, but the words dissolved into nothing, because beneath the gunfire and the artillery and the rain he could hear them. The war cry, rising from the smoke and the mud. Voices of men who should already be dead, still moving, still coming. He abandoned the gun. Sergeant Hani Manahi hit the first concrete bunker at a dead run. His bayonet punched through Wehrmacht gray wool. The German inside triggered his Luger twice at point-blank range. 2 9mm rounds tore through Manahi's shoulder. He twisted the blade deeper. Second Lieutenant Moana Nui Akiwa Ngarimu came through the gap Manahi had carved. His Thompson submachine gun worked from the hip. 7 pounds of weapon, .45 ACP in 30-round magazines. He swept through 2 German positions, taking hits, staying on his feet. He died standing, facing the enemy, the Thompson still firing. He was 23 years old. He received the Victoria Cross posthumously. New Zealand's highest military honor. By 900 hours, 128 men were down, 64% casualties. The railway station had fallen. The surviving 72 men dug into the rubble among their dead. Private George MacDonald couldn't walk. He'd taken a round through the leg. The stretcher bearers had given him a captured Walther P-38, 6 rounds, and simple instructions. If the Germans overrun the position, make them pay for it. MacDonald sat in the mud with his back against a broken wall, one hand on the pistol, the other on the field telephone. The line crackled. "They got me, sir," he said into the receiver. "But I can still mind the telephone." The wire stayed open. Lieutenant Colonel James Henare moved through the ruins looking at what remained of Te Hokowitu Atu. His voice cut through the sound of distant shelling. It was not a tactical order, not a command about flanking positions or ammunition resupply. "Stand as Maori, stand as Maori, stand as Maori." The order echoed off broken walls. It was not just instruction, it was identity, the thing that made them more than soldiers. Ancient codes brought forward to a freezing Italian morning in February 1944, spoken over the dead, spoken to the living, spoken to whatever came after. The station held for 6 hours before the German counterattack pushed them back. They gave up ground. They did not give up the identity that had taken it. From the desert to Crete to Italy, the 28th bled across 3 theaters: North Africa's sandstorms and killing heat. Crete's olive groves turned into killing fields. Italy's frozen crags and endless mud and rain. Each engagement cost them men they couldn't replace. Each engagement added to the legend no German intelligence report could fully explain. Erwin Rommel had seen most of what the Second World War could produce by the time he made his assessment. He had driven British armor across North Africa in humiliating retreat. He understood military excellence from the inside. His words became the definitive judgment on what the 28th represented. "Give me the Maori Battalion, and I will conquer the world." Not admiration in a sentimental sense. Professional recognition from a general who dealt exclusively in military reality. These weren't colonial troops performing European-style warfare. They were something the existing doctrine had no category for. Warriors who carried their ancestors' spirits into machine gun fire because those spirits were real to them, because identity and combat were inseparable, because standing as Maori meant fighting as Maori, and fighting as Maori meant fusing ancient instinct with modern weapons in a way that no training manual had designed, but no enemy could fully counter. The mathematics of their sacrifice were brutal. At Cassino, 64% in one morning. Across the full campaign, hundreds of dead and wounded from a battalion that could never grow larger than its tribal base. Each man lost was irreplaceable in ways that went beyond military manpower. They were sons of specific iwi, carriers of specific bloodlines, links in chains of warrior tradition that stretched back centuries. They volunteered anyway. They charged anyway. They fixed bayonets and stood up out of the mud anyway. What did that look like to the men trying to stop them? It looked like men running straight into machine gun fire without slowing down. It looked like a rifle being swung like a club after the magazine ran dry, and the bayonet had been used, and there was nothing left but weight and fury. It sounded like the haka rolling across no man's land before first light, building from a low rumble into something that climbed inside the chest of every man who heard it. Voice frequency analysis conducted decades later confirmed what the German machine gunners felt in real time. The low register chant triggered primal fear responses that conventional suppressive fire training couldn't override. Even through artillery bombardment, even with their hands on the guns and the tactical logic clear in front of them, German crews hesitated. Those crucial seconds, that's what the haka bought. Not magic, not invincibility. Seconds. And in a bayonet charge across 1,500 meters of open ground, seconds are the difference between a gun traversing in time and a rifle butt finding a temple. The night raids bought something different. They bought uncertainty. The German companies that pulled back from North African positions without contact orders weren't cowards. They were rational men responding to a threat they couldn't define. When your sentries disappear silently and your weapons vanish with them, and the only evidence is a body found at dawn, the threat becomes infinite. It could be anywhere. It could be right behind you. The scalp hunters had made the dark itself into a weapon. Everything about the way the 28th fought came from the same source. Traditional Maori warfare wasn't primitive by any measure that matters. It was sophisticated, psychologically precise, and built around exactly the kind of close-quarters dominance that modern infantry doctrine struggles to produce artificially. The haka was psychological preparation and psychological attack simultaneously. The taiaha technique translated to rifle handling in ways that felt natural to men who had grown up learning it. The tribal competition between companies created unit cohesion more durable than any structured team-building exercise. It wasn't indigenous tradition competing with modern warfare. It was indigenous tradition enhancing it, completing it, filling the gaps that drill manuals left empty. Fort Bragg, decades after the war ended, 500 hours. Green Beret trainees gathered around an instructor pulling out a worn, tactical manual, not standard doctrine. This one was marked 28th Battalion, Psychological Warfare Applications. Rifles as taiaha combat staffs, the instructor said. Bren guns fired from the hip. They charged 1,500 meters of open ground with fixed bayonets. And they made it work. Modern special forces studied the recordings. The haka before casino. The night patrol techniques from North Africa. Contemporary doctrine tries to classify it, asymmetric cultural integration, which is the academic way of saying something simpler. Warriors aren't manufactured. They're awakened. The 28th proved that a fighting culture, carried intact and adapted to modern weapons, doesn't just survive on 20th century battlefields. It dominates them. Green Berets studied the integration. Navy SEALs adapted the psychological warfare principles. Different cultures, same recognition. Find the warrior tradition. Weaponize identity. Make fear your ammunition before the first shot is fired. The Germans at 42nd Street learned it in 12 minutes of close-quarters violence. The machine gunners at Casino learned it in the seconds before the bayonets reached the wire. The sentries in North Africa learned it, briefly, at the end, when cold steel found them in the dark. They all learned the same thing. There are forces on a battlefield that transcend conventional doctrine, that live below the level of tactics and above the level of training, that come from somewhere older than the weapons they use and more durable than the armies built to stop them. The 28th Maori Battalion was one of them. 5 companies, different iwi, one identity forged in the oldest fire there is, the fire of ancestors watching, the fire of honor that cannot be surrendered even when the ground is flooded and the tanks never came, and 64% of your brothers are already down, and the German guns are still firing, and there is nothing left to do except stand up. Stand as Maori. It was the first command and the last. It was tactics and identity and ancestry and defiance all in the same breath. It was what separated the 28th from every other unit that fought across those same killing grounds, bled into the same mud, stared down the same machine guns. They didn't just endure, they charged. And in charging, they carried something forward that no bullet could reach and no war could bury. The Desert Fox had chosen his words carefully. He had found the elite of the British Army. He had found Te Hoka A2. If you enjoyed this story, hit subscribe for more World War II historical deep dives every week. Thanks for watching.